Chapter 3. The Fearsome Ex-Gladiator. "I think we'd better get out of here before this one-eyed ex-gladiator shows up," Mucius said. Perplexed, he started to pull on his nose. Mucius was brave, but he wasn't foolhardy. "I think so too," Flavius said. Nobody protested, and Mucius signaled for Udo to follow. They ran across the Forum Boarium over to the Valibrum, the big, low-lying esplanade between the Capitoline and Palatine hills, and swung into Tuscan Street, the liveliest main street in Rome. It led from the Valibrum to the Forum Romanum, the center of the Roman Empire. Once on Tuscan Street, the boys felt more sure of themselves. Now they proceeded at a snail's pace. Dense crowds of people pushed along the sidewalk past shops and stalls in an endless chain, among them many foreigners. The city seemed overrun with Greeks, Arabs, Persians, Egyptians, and the most varied mob of wild-looking characters. The boys wondered what enigmatic corners of the world they came from. The roadway was filled with hundreds of sedan chairs, large and small, elegant and shabby, many borne by 2, others by 6 or 8 slaves. They were all wedged together like 2 armies in battle. The fact was, all traffic had come to a halt. In the Forum, the Emperor's Guard had just marched past, 12 cohorts from the Praetorian Guard. They were going up the Palatine as relief watch. The Praetorian Guard looked glorious. They wore yellow uniforms with red belts and big earrings and were armed with bamboo spears. The officers had iron helmets decorated with colored feathers, and their breast armor sparkled like polished silver. The people in Tuscan Street didn't bother much with the Praetorian Guard. It had grown unbearably hot. The sun already was high in a cloudless sky and shone down relentlessly on the pavements. Almost all the women protected themselves with umbrellas. None of the Roman citizens wore togas. They had put on the lightest tunics they could find in their wardrobes. People flailed their arms wildly about to chase away swarms of blue-bottle flies descending on them from all sides. The whole area smelled sickeningly from the stockyards at the Forum Boarium, the filthy waters of the Tiber, and the drainage canals of the Great Sewer, which ran alongside Tuscan Street. Rome was not a pleasant place to visit in the summertime. The boys encircled Udo and bored a path through the crowd like a patrol of legionnaires. Once they reached the Forum, they sighed with relief. They finally had elbow room again and more air. They sat themselves down on an upholstered bench in front of the Temple of Saturn and wiped the sweat from their foreheads. Udo sat down on the stone pavement and leaned against the milestone on the speaker's platform. He was panting like a wild beast, too. "Here we are with Udo like Priam amid the ruins of Troy," Caius said. The boys were tired, hungry, and irritated. It was not much cooler in the Forum. Even the pigeons roosted lazily on the roofs of the basilica. "Your comparison stinks," Publius taunted Caius. "Priam didn't have time to spend among the ruins. He was slain by Neoptolemus immediately, thanks to Xanthippus." Publius knew his Homer almost by heart. "You stink," Caius replied wrathfully. "Dumbbell," Publius said. Caius was about to jump him, but Mucius intervened. "No fighting," he said, "or one of you will have to go home. There's no room for 2 cocks on the same dunghill." Caius backed off reluctantly. After all, Mucius was the leader of their band. They had pledged themselves to him with a solemn oath and had to obey him. "Don't get excited," Julius said. "Nothing's lost. We'll simply sell Udo to somebody else." "What can we hope to get for a deaf and dumb slave?" Flavius said. "Callan took us in." "It could take us a long time to find a buyer," Mucius said. "It would be smarter to get rid of Udo as quickly as possible." "Why don't we take him to the island on the Tiber, to the temple of Asclepius, where everybody puts out his old or sick slaves?" Caius suggested. "That would be wrong," Rufus said. "A slave's human too. We treated Rompus, my tutor, like a friend. My father gave him his freedom later." "Bah!" said Caius. "A slave isn't a real human being. Last week one of our slaves kissed my sister Claudia on the hand in gratitude because she forgave him for accidentally breaking her favorite cup. My father saw what happened and had a fight with her for letting a slave kiss her hand." "What happened to the slave?" Flavius asked. "My father sold him the same day to the amphitheater as a gladiator." "There's the answer!" Antonius shouted. "Why don't we sell Udo as a gladiator? They can always use new gladiators. They're slaughtered by the dozens in the arena at every performance." Antonius's proposal inspired the others. "That solves all our problems," Julius said. "Maybe we'll get even more than 450 sesterces for him." They banded together at once, and cutting across the Forum, headed toward the Via Sacra, where the amphitheater lay. In front of the triumphal arch of Augustus, they saw a street vendor who was selling figs soaked in honey. The figs were piled in a crate, the honey filled a bronze jug. Publius stopped, transfixed. "Hey, Julius," he cried, "I'm starving. How about treating each of us to 3 figs? We still have 50 sesterces left of our spending money. 3 figs cost only a copper, according to the sign there." "Pretty expensive," Julius muttered, but he pulled out his money pouch and counted 7 coins. Hesitantly, he added another for Udo. "Here, buy figs for Udo, too," he called to Publius and handed him the money. But Publius never got to the vendor. Suddenly, a burly-looking man broke through the circle of people standing around the fig vendor, threw himself at Udo, flung a noose around his neck in a second, and pulled it tight. "By Hades, I've finally caught you, you wretch!" he yelled like a raging buffalo. The boys were petrified. The man had only one eye, and he wore a wooden sword at his belt. He was the fearsome ex-gladiator.